Hello, everybody. Dave Neal here, stand-up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. Greer apologizes for her defense of Blackface back in 2016. She released a statement in January apologizing, but now apologizes on the Women Tell All, where she offers aspects of her apology that she did not say in her original apology. Does this make sense? She's updated her apology, as is how it works. Usually you apologize for something, and if you don't hit all the right notes, people tell you, hey, you missed out on this, and then you can look into that, and then you can offer a greater respect for what it is you're talking about. So we're going to get into that. Does this make sense? I'm going to try to make sense of it all. Follow me on Instagram at DNeals, patreon.com/Dave Neal. And it's okay if you don't nail your apology the first take. Usually when you make a mistake in life, you don't realize why, we're all trying usually with the best intentions. So if you make a mistake, you don't realize what exactly you did wrong. You learn about that, you educate yourself, and then you can re-apologize. And then if you miss something, everyone who's been in a fight with their significant other has said, I'm sorry I did this. No, that's not the thing that made me upset. Okay, well then what made you upset? I was upset that you negated my feelings. Okay, let me think about that. And then okay. So anyway, that's where we're at. So with Greer, and I'm going to get to the recap this afternoon on Bachelor Rush Hour, the podcast. I'm just, as you guys know, flew back from Indonesia last night, and it was about 30 hours of traveling from the remote villa to the airport in Bali, to Taipei, Taiwan, to Los Angeles. So very exhausted, but we're getting through it all right now. There was a TikTok posted which shows Greer's full apology. I'm going to play that. It's obviously making light of the issue of the word choices that are used in an apology, as it is apology bingo. So if you're watching on the YouTube video, you can see that check marks of all the different words being used throughout Greer's apology. Now, Greer and Jesse do a very good job of tackling this issue. It was posted here. Let's go to what Jesse said. The truth is, as a franchise, we've done a very poor job of addressing serious topics head on. Now, our channel, we discuss this every time it happens. You know what I mean? I think the thing that's different with our channel is we're not like, I don't know. I'm not in the place to tell people that they're irredeemable or that they're this or they're that. We just listen to their apology. We discuss the issues, and I think we're all better off for that. And it's not a pat on my back. That's just saying, we called out the show when they did not address Eric Schwer's issue on Women Tell All, or Men Tell All, which would have been important to do. They discussed it on a podcast afterwards. So now Bachelor is tackling it head on. Late to the party? Sure. But it's a step in the right direction.
Very poor job in the past of addressing serious topics head on. And we're not going to miss that opportunity here tonight. Now, I know you have given a subsequent apology on social media and online, but I do want to give you the opportunity here to address this and share your experience with this.
Now, some people, I'll just say this, some people find it sort of like, why does she have to apologize now? She apologized 2 months ago. And my thing is, if you're sorry for something, apologize on all the different platforms that you can to reach the biggest audience. It shouldn't be like an ego thing. Just admit when you mess something up. Of course, I don't think that's a big deal at all. She released a statement. She wasn't allowed to talk because that's what the show does. They don't let you talk until they do. You're under a contract. And now she's talking in what is their biggest platform, which is their live taping. So it's a good thing that she's releasing this statement previously. I think the show learned from Rachel Kirkconnell's mess that they should have released a statement right away, but also discuss it. There's always enough time in the episode to have these complicated conversations.
What I failed to mention in my apology was that what happened was racist.
And of course, this is a big sort of issue with a lot of apologies, is that I think we saw Eric Schwer's in a second here, that a lot of times people say what they did was wrong, but that they won't actually say that it was racist. Reality Steve tweeted this. So Eric actually dressed in blackface and never once had to address it publicly, but Greer defended it. And a lot of people don't even realize that if they associate Greer with blackface, they think she did it. She defended someone else who had done it in 2016. Can production explain why they protected Eric and not Greer? I get now they want to address it, but it seems convenient. My thought was they protected Eric because he was still with Gabby and they didn't want to tackle that storyline. That doesn't make it right. And then Reality Steve says, I think Greer used the word racist 4 or 5 times in her apology while speaking in a public forum at the time of this taping. Probably wasn't easy. Eric released a statement on Instagram and never used the word racist once. I'd say 2 vastly different apologies. And that's probably the next layer of what people need to realize in these apologies, like call it out. You might not have thought it was at the time, but in hindsight, you can realize that it's mocking of a culture. And that might not be a conversation that Eric was having when he did blackface in his community, because you would hope that if they were having that conversation, they wouldn't have done the blackface in the first place, which was in a yearbook photo. So pockets of different culture within our country are not all at the finish line at the same time. That doesn't mean that they won't get there, and it doesn't mean we can't encourage people to get there. But Eric's apology in 2022, was it 2022? Should have included, hey, this was a racist thing to do. It just should have. I think that would, anyone recommending an apology would say, call it out. But I don't think it means he's a horrible person. He did apologize. I just think, when you're grading it as you're doing on this TikTok with regards to the bingo here, he didn't hit all the notes that Greer hits.
It's not about the intent. It's about the impact. And
impact?
This acquaintance of mine that I knew performing blackface was racist. Me defending it was racist.
Okay, so she mentions the person who did it was racist. Defending it is racist.
Ignorance was racist. And I'm just so ashamed. I'm just deeply sorry that I hurt the Black community. I can't go back in time. All I can do is try to be better now and try to do better.
And there it is. Can't go back in time, try to be better now and better in the future. Okay, so obviously we're getting this story published all over. Elizabeth Wagmeister in Variety says, the Bachelor contestant Greer apologizes for doing blackface. My ignorance was racist and I'm just so ashamed. So when we talk about, and again, I don't share the bingo version of the apology to make light of it, but it goes to show that there are words you have to hit to make sure you have your apology as impactful as possible, because you can't just be in a relationship where you go, oh, honey, I'm sorry for all the things that happened in the fight. No, specifically, I'm sorry that I threw spaghetti at the wall. I was very upset and I didn't mean to. I'm sorry that I said that the way you cry looks kind of silly and whatever. Those would be horrible examples. I've never thrown spaghetti in the wall. I've never seen spaghetti I did not finish off my plate. But the point is that it's important to label exactly the things that you are sorry for. With that said, there are people's opinions that thought this whole scenario was on the Culty side. So let's jump across here to, well, first of all, there's plenty of people in different communities that are happy. Bachelor Diversity Campaign said, hey, this was a good apology. This was a good thing that happened. Greer had shared a couple Instagram statuses. Bachelor Rabbit Hole said, so much respect for Greer after watching The Woman Tell All. I applaud her growth and accountability. Let's see, and we have a couple more clips here. 1 second. Michelle Young, of course, had discussed this ad nauseum this past year because she walked out of the taping when Eric Schwartz didn't address it, which, of course, I don't know if that's who's to blame there. Probably a combination of Eric and producers. They're the ones who script the show. There was always time for this conversation to be had. But they do say they think that Michelle was one of the pieces of the catalyst for the change in the way production handled the controversy. And of course, Rachel Lindsay as well. Rachel's discussed and criticized the show, and many others have criticized the show. Any other clips there? I think that's all we have from that channel. But let's go to Batch Stoley, who called the whole scenario culty.
I am kind of at a loss for words regarding this segment with Greer and the diversity professor or coach or whoever that was. Guys, that was really culty. I'm not going to lie. And if I wasn't watching live and reacting as I go, I would sit with this a lot longer because that felt very icky to me, to make Greer have to answer for behavior that she did not do in 2016, but rather she had an opinion on it, but it wasn't an expansive enough concept of racism as we understand it in 2023. It was just a tweet she did like 8 years ago, but we have to make her prove in 2023 with a witness on site that she no longer believes this and understands the evils of racism. That was really hard for me to watch.
And of course, Greer knows that her opinion was wrong. I don't think anyone's defending, and this is where you get into the sort of tic-tacky conversation that Chris Harrison was having. Are we going to see things through the lens where we are now versus the lens of 2018, as he said with Rachel Kirkconnell or whatever that time period was? But the point does stand that the talk about this was not expansive enough in 2016. It doesn't mean the conversation wasn't there. People will comment on this video. Dave, I knew it was bad back then. Look, yeah, I understand that. But whenever we have this conversation about politicians who didn't support same-sex marriage, we go, look, you can look at the Clintons and the Obamas. You can look at the left and the right. You can look at people that weren't educated enough, or at least their constituents weren't educated enough to be pro same-sex marriage just a short few years ago. So while you and I and other people might say, hey, we never cared about who loved who or what their gender was and all that, I totally agree with you. But the people that weren't there at that finish line, they just weren't there yet. I think in 2023, we have a majority of people that think, and I talk specifically about same-sex marriage because that's a place where we've gotten to as a society where very quickly we were all okay with it. Well, very quickly we're learning as a society, we're learning that it's obviously racist to mock another culture's skin color because we've looked and educated ourselves at the concept of colorism. The concept that if your skin color was past I think they called it the brown paper bag level. If it was darker than that color, then you were not allowed in certain grocery stores or in certain restaurants, or the segregation existed not just on a black and white issue, but how black somebody was they were treated differently, and that is so important in the conversation because we look at blackface as not just dressing up as a person who was in African American or whoever the person that they're dressing up as, but it's the mockery that exists from the minstrel shows, from the dates when black people weren't even allowed to portray themselves in movies, and rather you would see white people put on blackface. So that's the root that needs to be addressed and talked about. Now, the idea that Batch with Soli has here is that, look, the conversation that was happening between people that were, whatever age they were and whatever community they were, was just not as expansive. So let's discuss it, but not hold people accountable to things they said years ago. That's a conversation worth having. That doesn't mean that I don't think Greer's apology was needed or was in the conversation was important. And I may sound redundant when I have these conversations because you do have to make sure that you hit all of the different notes. So people don't just say, what, Dave's defending things she said? No, we're not going down that human centipede, as we call it, of, well, someone did blackface, then someone defended blackface, and someone got upset at the apology, but, as far as it goes down. No, it can be racist, and it can also be a conversation we have moving forward where nobody's trying to cancel Greer. Nobody's trying to say that it went too far. Or at least, everyone's got different opinions, but my opinion is that it was good to have the conversation. It was Greer, if anything, pays the price for the show not having an inadequate conversation about this last season with Eric. Reality Steve says, why did they defend or why did they protect Eric? My thought being, and again, I don't think it's right, but my thought being they just, with all the different storylines between Rachel, Recchia, and Tino, and Gabby and Eric were actually celebrating their relationship, that it wasn't something they wanted to open up. But of course, by not opening up and talking about it briefly, they probably made it more of a story than it would have been if they just did the work to talk about it in the moment. Does that make sense? Does any of this make sense? I think so. But I just wanted to make sure we covered this. Is there anything else left?
I get that the show is wanting to have these conversations, or at least demonstrate a new openness to having these conversations about contestant history and blackface. Fine. I just do not think that this was the case or the person to dissect and make an example out of. And by the way, I don't even think that these thought interventions are even healthy. This is not what we want from society, in which we have gladiator style confrontations to make sure that someone is very up to date on all our definitions of racism or whatever the most progressive stance on something is. And I'm not trying to say that racism is just a stance, no, but this was not that serious. And I do find it very weird to have like a racism doctor on site who can like give professional testimony and attest to Greer's like sound mind and like on the path to enlightenment, and then Jesse being like, she is teaching me the ways too, like thank you for your work. Like, that was culty, and that is what people mean, that is what I think when people say wokeness is a religion. That was religious.
And that comes from someone, I think Bachelor Soli has said in the past, she's a liberal-minded person who's just looking at it from a place where she thinks that I would probably, and I don't mean to put words in anyone's mouth, I would probably say she thinks that apology was more held under gunpoint, metaphorically speaking, because as we've talked about before, the show's psychopathic, like most corporations, or all corporations are. The show doesn't care. They just want to appease as many audiences as possible. That's what they want to do. They don't want to offend the people that aren't at that finish line. So that's why they probably didn't address it with Eric. They don't want to offend the audience that says, oh my gosh, how could you not address it? So last season, rather than address it on Men Tell All, what they did was they addressed it. They didn't address it there, and then they addressed it on podcast, which was probably more left-leaning, which is insulting to their audience in the first place. Now they address it, and it is a tough conversation to have. Jesse doesn't want to mess that up. He saw when Chris Harrison messed that up. But it's a conversation worth having, and I think we're all, need to be in that space where we can discuss it, and I think that's a good thing. That's always a good thing. All right, folks, let me know what you think. I've got more content coming to you this afternoon. Bachelor Rush Hour, the podcast, will be here, and we'll have some full recap of all the topics we don't discuss in the videos today. We will discuss them on the podcast because there's a lot to get into. All right, folks, more content coming your way right after this.